Some franchises live on without any fear that they will become that nostalgic memory in years to come. Other franchises are not so fortunate and fade away with only the occasional mention from people reminiscing. I was one of those people talking about how great Advance Wars was, the first time playing the games on the Game Boy Advance and then on the DS, and then nothing. 15 long years I have waited for something, anything of this franchise, and then it happened. No longer was I talking about how great Advance Wars was, I'm now talking about how great Advance Wars is. So let's talk about it while I review Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, from now on I'll just use Advance Wars, is a remake of the first two games that appeared on the Game Boy Advance. GBA, Advance Wars, self-explanatory. The game is a turn-based strategy game that pits you against other players fighting on various maps while building units and capturing properties until one player is victorious. While the game is simple to look at, there is deep strategy within. Elements like building units, terrain types and weather conditions all play a factor into understanding the game. And while that might sound daunting to a new player, the game does a great job of teaching you and showing you how to play and understand the concepts. The gameplay of Advance Wars is easy to learn and not too hard to master. What makes this game fun and interesting is learning how to navigate situations with the units you have at your disposal versus the map you're playing on. So what does a normal game look like? Well, it goes like this. You start the game with either a set amount of units or no units at all, and instead you have to build your army. Once you have moved or built your units on your turn, you end your turn and the AI or the next player then takes theirs. As each turn goes back and forth, decisions will be made on the fly. For example, you may wish to capture a property with your infantry, but this places that unit in a risky situation and you have to figure out how to protect it. Or you may have a unit with low health and you have to decide whether to return that unit home for repairs or to attack key enemy units. The game goes back and forth until one player defeats the other player's units or captures the enemy HQ. During play, there are many units that the player has access to, spanning from a tank all the way to a battleship. Each unit has a strength and a weakness, leading to decision making on what to use and when. Not all units are made equal though, and during a game you may find yourself building more of certain types and only building other units for certain situations. Here's a quick rundown of the units. Firstly, a unit is either based on land, sea or air and are built from either a factory, an airport or seaport. The next thing to keep in mind: does this unit attack directly, moving next to another unit, or indirectly, attacking from a distance? And lastly, there are also transport units, which, you guessed it, transport units. Land units have the most variety and will likely be the ones you build the most. There are infantry units, which are required for capturing buildings, more on this later. Tanks of different types, which are the main attacking force of your army. And finally, the more specialist units like the anti-air gun or recon unit. Moving to air units, there are bombers, fighters, transport copters and battle copters. All of these units have high movement and good damage, but cost a lot more than ground units. And then lastly, there are sea units, which consist of battleships, cruisers, transports and submarines. Again, these units will cost more, but can be extremely important for maps that have water. As mentioned earlier, infantry and mech units are the only two units that can capture properties on a map. Why is this important? Well, if you don't capture properties, you won't get more money. And the more money you have, the more units you can build, as well as afford better units. On top of increasing your income, it allows you to have more factories, airports and seaports, which in turn lets you deploy more units. It's fair to say that infantry and mechs are some of the most important units in the game and are key to helping you win. Then there's the terrain. While playing, it's not just about the fighting, it's also about where you're fighting. Roads, for example, are the fastest way to get around but give no defense when fighting on them, whereas fighting in a city will give you much higher defense. Other terrain types include grassland, woods, bases, HQs, mountains and rivers, though those last two can only be occupied by infantry and mech units. So that's units and terrain. What's next? Well, the last thing to be aware of is weather. For the most part, battles will be fought on clear days, but weather can change randomly or via certain powers. Apart from a clear day, you will also come across rain, snow and fog of war. Rain reduces movement as well as spawning fog of war. Snow greatly reduces movement for units but does not cause fog of war to spawn. Keep an eye on the weather changes in a match, as it can lead to a game taking an unfortunate turn. Sometimes it's best to play cautiously when the weather changes. Fog of War is an interesting mechanic. In a normal game, you can see the entire map, the enemy movements, what they're capturing or attacking. Fog of War changes this by showing the entire map but having a dark fog covering it, only letting the player see so far around each unit. These maps require smart play, as it's possible to get destroyed if you don't have patience. This is where the recon unit shines, as it's designed to give massive vision in the Fog of War. It's also worth noting that places like woods and reefs can only be seen into during Fog of War if a unit stops next to it, allowing for the possibilities of an ambush. So those are the main mechanics you need to know when playing this game. How units work, how terrain works, and how weather and Fog of War work. The last big thing to be aware of is COs and CO powers. A CO, or Commanding Officer, is a character you pick during the campaign or skirmish battles that give you, the player, some kind of buff as well as a special power. If we take a look at Orange Star's main three COs, Andy, Max and Sammy, we can see the differences in strengths and weaknesses. Andy, for example, is the all-rounder with no weaknesses or strengths, which makes him an ideal CO for a beginner. His power allows him to repair the health of his units, which is powerful because normally you need to be on a city or factory to do this. Max, on the other hand, has a massive buff to direct attacking units, but his indirect units suffer greatly by having less range and doing less damage. His power gives an even bigger increase in damage for his direct attacking units. Now, if we contrast those two with Sammy, it's different again. Sammy is an infantry specialist, meaning her infantry and mechs hit harder, can capture properties with more ease, and some of her transport units even have extra movement. Her weakness is that all of her direct attacking units that aren't infantry or mechs don't do as much damage. Her power increases the damage her infantry and mechs can do, as well as increasing their movement. On top of the three, there are tons of other COs with their own unique skills and abilities that shake up the gameplay enough to make each game feel different. As a package, Reboot Camp contains multiple different modes to keep the player busy for hours. The obvious mode to start with is the campaign. Here you can choose between Advance Wars 1 or Advance Wars 2. Advance Wars 1 feels like an extended tutorial of the game's mechanics, as well as setting up most of the characters within the story. Advance Wars 2 adds in new characters and gameplay elements, which leads to more challenging levels to conquer. It is worth noting that these games' last few missions really do test the player and are significantly harder. Outside of the campaigns, the other two places you will likely spend your time are the War Room and the Versus mode. The War Room is a challenge mode that pits you against preset maps and COs and are designed to be replayed over and over for a high score. Like the campaigns, the War Room maps give coins which can be used to buy items from the shop. More on that in a bit. Versus mode allows players to set up highly customizable matches of up to 4 players. Some things you can adjust include starting funds, how many funds you get from properties, how often the weather changes, team or solo games, etc. This is also the mode that allows for up to 4 human players to battle it out. The other place to battle friends is online. Unfortunately, this is probably the weakest part of the game, as you can only battle people on your Nintendo Switch friends list. At the time of writing this review, I haven't been able to try this out as I don't know anyone else with this game. The other option you have is to share custom made maps online, but also the same problem applies. No friends, no sharing maps. Sharing maps? Yep, there is a pretty decent map editor in this game, just like the originals had. If you're into that kind of thing, it's fun to mess around and see what you can create. There's also unlockable parts of the map editor that can expand how you build your maps. The last two modes in the game are the shop and the extras menu. The shop allows players to spend those hard-fought coins on fun new stuff. Do you want new maps? There are tons of those. New playable COs? Yeah, we've got those. How about some awesome music track? Yeah, we got those too. Basically, the shop is the place to go for extra fun content. The extras menu is where you can use that stuff you unlock from playing the game or from the shop. It's a standard affair, but if it works, don't fix it. Here you can look at artwork, listen to music, watch all the cutscenes in the game, and probably the coolest feature, look over each CO in a dossier, which contains information about each CO's powers, the differences between games, and some fun character building. When the game was first shown off, people were split on the graphics. Some people loved the toy aesthetic, while others preferred the pixel art from the Game Boy Advance versions. For me, I enjoy it for what it is, simple and clean. It's easy to tell the units apart from one another, as well as the terrain being easy to identify. It also helps that the UI of the game never gets in the way, and if you want more information, it will give it to you. For the COs, we get a different, more cartoon-like art style that fits perfectly for each of the characters. With any game, the music is important to me. If the music sucks, it can put me off wanting to play it. Whereas on the flip side, if the music is great, then it can enhance my experience and enjoyment. While I already loved the music from the original games, getting to hear these tracks with new remixes was a delight. Andy's Anthem is already one of my all-time favourites, and hearing this new version actually made me cry. No, I'm serious, it's really that good. Along with that, many of the other CO themes sound awesome with this new lick of paint. Even the new powered up themes for Advance Wars 1 is an awesome twist, bringing new crazier versions of the CO themes. Here's just a quick sample of some of the awesome tracks in this game. As Reboot Camp is a remake of the first two games, it should 100% include quality of life changes, and it's safe to say that the game does. Firstly, the game adds a rewind turn function, allowing players who play a turn and feel unsatisfied with their choices to replay that turn and try again. Next, we get a brand new zoom function that allows for zooming out to see the entire map, as well as being able to zoom in and see more of the details. Next is the fast forward function, which allows anyone to zip through a battle scene or the enemy's turn at a higher pace. You can go into the options and turn animations off, but this is just a nice feature that lets you still see what's going on without having to do that. One smaller change is that you can reduce the amount of button clicks on your turn. Now you can select a unit, run the cursor over the unit you want to attack, and it'll move over and start combat. Very minor change, but it is nice to have. The big one for me though is the difficulty of this game and how it doesn't gate content off. What do I mean by this? Well, in the original versions of the game, certain COs were locked behind the hard campaign mode. Now, however, WayForward have decided to let you change the difficulty from normal to easy and back again anytime before you start a mission, and all the COs are now unlocked through the normal campaign. While this might seem small to many people, this is huge because gating content through difficulty can be a turn off for players, including me. Video game difficulty is its own topic, but let me say that this is a fantastic way to do it for people that may struggle to get through the game, but get the same rewards regardless of how they complete the campaigns. And let's be honest, gating off gameplay mechanics in the form of COs behind hard mode just doesn't sit right. If it isn't obvious, I absolutely love Advance Wars Reboot Camp. I'm still shocked that it even exists, and I hope that it did well enough for Nintendo and WayForward to maybe get the DS games in a pack as well, or God forbid, a new game in the series. No matter what 2023 brings, I honestly can't see another game dethroning this as my game of the year. I'm fully aware that for a lot of people this game came and went, but for me it's right there front and centre. It's not the biggest release, but damn is it the most unexpected release, and I couldn't be more happier with the final product. Thank you so much for watching this review. Scripted content isn't something I normally do, but Advance Wars was the driver for me doing this. I hope you found this review useful, and there's always a chance more of these can happen in the future. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next video.